My coworkers liked stupid pranks. I worked in a shitty clothing store in the local mall. It's the kind of place that hires high schoolers and, over the summer, college kids. It's minimum wage, so our employers didn't expect much. Honestly, they just hoped we didn't come in drunk. Hell, if our eyes were a little red, they'd look the other way, if you know what I mean. Which is why the pranks continued for so long. It started out small. Jumping out from behind doors, hiding in clothing racks, prank calling the store on days off. It was funny and petty and stupid. That's the key word again. Stupid. It was my coworker, Spencer. He's the reason the pranking eventually came to an end about 6 months ago. And the reason that I eventually quit my job. See, none of us were exactly rocket scientists. Most of us were a little dumb for the sole fact that we were teenagers. But Spencer was dumber than the rest of us. I mean, that kid was a few eggs short of a dozen. Not college material, and probably would never move away from our hometown. But we liked him just the same. He was good for a laugh. But, God, he took it too far. It happened on Tuesday. I was working from 3 to 9, which meant I was on closing duty. I mopped the storefront, cleaned the windows, took out the trash, and threw the cardboard boxes from inventory into the cardboard compactor. I locked up and did a quick inventory check. Most importantly, I did it all by myself. See, Spencer was supposed to be working with me. He was supposed to come in at noon and leave at 8. It's not uncommon for someone to close alone, but usually there's another person there for part of the evening. It makes finishing closing duties easier. I mean, I can't take out the trash while I'm helping customers, you know? He had been there when I came in at 2, but at some point he left without letting me know and without clocking out. I was pretty irritated. I wondered if maybe he was playing some kind of joke on me. Spencer wasn't the type to think things through. He might very well have thought that abandoning me on the night shift would be hilarious. I called Spencer, but didn't get an answer. I called my manager and let her know that Spencer had ducked out on me. I expected Spencer to return my call or at least text, but he didn't. The next time I worked, 2 days later, I asked my manager, but she hadn't heard from Spencer either. Now, Spencer might not be the brightest bulb in the box, and yes, sometimes he forgets his schedule or messes up and doesn't come in for a shift, but he isn't the kind to just shirk his responsibilities. If he misses work, he accepts the blame for it and makes it up to his coworkers. He doesn't make excuses, and it doesn't happen often. That's why none of us employees really have a problem with him. So the fact that he was completely MIA left me a bit confused. If he'd left me there as a joke, he would have confessed to it by now. He wouldn't have stopped coming in to work entirely. I didn't get worried until the next week when Spencer's mother officially filed a missing persons report. She came into the store to talk to the manager. I saw them disappear into the office, which is really just a cramped closet in the back room with a dusty old desktop computer, and I could barely make myself focus until they came back out. Mrs. Damson, that is to say, Spencer's mom, had tears in her eyes. I heard my manager, Kelly, assure her that they checked the security footage. Then, Kelly asked me to come to the back office. She had never done that before. It turns out that I was the last person to see Spencer before he went missing. At least, the last known person. His mother had seen him at the house before he went to work that Tuesday. He never came home. Spencer had been working with me, and only me. Tuesdays are slow, and Kelly had been busy along with the rest of the managers, so there had been no manager present. The last time I remembered seeing Spencer was around 4:30 when he had gone to use the employee restroom in the back. And that's the last anyone had heard of him. I told Kelly what I remembered, and she told me that she was going to try to get her hands on the security footage. Most likely, Spencer had just hightailed it with some of his buddies. Impromptu road trip or something. Hell if I know. Kelly assured me over and over that the most likely scenario was that Spencer was completely fine and had just done something unexpected. Unexpected and stupid, but then again, this was Spencer we were talking about. Stupid was implied. I let that placate me for the most part, although I was still nervous the rest of the night. I managed to distract myself for most of the next day, playing video games with a few buddies. It wasn't until mid-evening when I got a call from Kelly.
Hey, Connor, can you come to my apartment? There's something I want to talk to you about.
I tried to ignore the churning in my gut as I climbed in the car and headed for Kelly's apartment. Kelly and I had sort of a fling going. Nothing serious, just hooking up on occasion. That's supposedly against store policy, but like I said, nobody gave a shit about much that went on at the store. Most people knew or at least suspected what we were up to, but nobody commented. Nobody cared. Sorry, that doesn't matter. The point is, I knew the way to Kelly's place and was there in 10 minutes. When I opened the door, she was shaking like a leaf and pale. She was as white as those little tombstones they made for children. She had also been drinking, but she wasn't drunk. Not yet. She looked ready to fall to pieces. "Is everything okay?" I asked. She was supposed to say yes. That's the answer you hope to get when you ask that question. But she didn't. Instead, she led me to the living room where her laptop was sitting open. It showed a fuzzy, indistinct picture on the screen. I stared at it as I listened to her explanation.
Connor, Shit, I don't know how to tell you this.
Every second that passed made me feel more and more like I was sinking into something awful. Something I couldn't escape. She was silent for a moment before she managed to continue.
I was able to review the security tapes. I didn't find anything for the ones inside the stores, so mall security let me look at the ones in back. I was thinking... you'd said Spencer had gone out the back of the store to use the bathroom. I thought maybe, he'd slipped out the back door.
The back door led to a small lot that housed the dumpsters, recycling containers, and a loading dock. I couldn't fathom what Spencer might have been doing out there.
The police are gonna talk to you tomorrow. They didn't want me to say anything, but I couldn't bear to let you go in there not knowing anything. Please understand, Connor, nobody thinks this was your fault. Nobody.
What isn't my fault? This whole situation felt surreal, like a goddamn nightmare. And it was about to get a lot worse. She took a deep breath.
I made a copy of what we saw before I called the police. The security guards looked the other way while I did it.
I don't know why she told me that. Stalling for time, I guess. She must have decided she couldn't stall any longer because at that moment, she pressed play. The first few minutes just showed the lot, empty and deserted. Then Spencer appeared on screen. Even on the grainy screen, I could see that he had this big smile on his face. It was the look he got when he had a joke so good he just had to tell someone. I watched in confusion at first as he strolled past the dumpsters. He stopped at the cardboard compactor. No, I whispered, my brain seizing on a sudden thought. A thought too terrible to contemplate. So terrible that it couldn't be true. It just couldn't be. I watched as Spencer climbed into the machine. He pulled the door mostly closed, but left it just barely open. He probably intended to jump out and scare me. A pretty good prank. I probably would have shit myself had it worked. But he hadn't counted on one thing. I knew what was going to happen, even as I watched my past self appear on the screen. I could feel everything inside me shattering as I watched myself push the door shut. See, I have this habit of running the compactor before I put anything in it. It started because when I began working at the store, I noticed the compactor was usually full by the time I had to use it. So I'd turn it on and smoke a cigarette while it crushed whatever was inside. Eventually, it became automatic. I watched as I turned the machine on. I watched as I smoked my cigarette, unable to hear Spencer's screams over the sound of the machinery. And I kept watching it over and over in my head, even as Kelly turned off the recording.
Connor, it was an accident. It wasn't your fault. The police are going to want to talk to you as a formality. They'll probably be pissed that I told you before they did, but I just thought you should know.
I didn't hear the rest of what she had to say. I stumbled out of the apartment, staggering for my car. That scene stuck on repeat in my head. I don't remember much about the drive home, or about the events of that night. Not really. All I can recall is my own personal hell as I relived that moment again and again. It didn't matter what Kelly said, or the cops for that matter, because in my heart, I was the one who killed Spencer. I was the one who pressed the button. Kelly was right about the police. They called me in to tell me what had happened. The video, of course, they couldn't show me, they said. It would be too traumatizing. I'm sure about halfway through our little interview, they figured out that I already seen it. I wondered if Kelly would catch hell for that. Not that I really cared. I was a murderer. Bits and pieces of the story came out over time. The police speculated that Spencer thought it might not be possible to be crushed in the machine. Some people apparently believe that the machine has an automatic stop if it senses movement. Spencer turned out to be wrong on that count. They did an autopsy. I still don't know how they managed that, what with the condition of the corpse. I don't know the exact results, but the cops told me he was probably high when he did it. He made a stupid decision under the influence of drugs. There's no way I could be blamed for that. Spencer's mother blames me. She screamed as much at me when she saw me a few weeks later in the supermarket. I don't hold it against her. She and I both know a truth that other people are trying to deny. I pressed the button that killed her son. It's my fault. I think the thing that disturbs me most, though, is Spencer's body. Now, I'm not supposed to know about it, but rumors get around, especially in a town like this. And anyway, if you know a little about the machine and how it works, it isn't surprising in the least. Spencer's body was compressed down nearly flat. His bones were crushed, squishing his internal organs into pudding. His eyes had bulged out and ran in a soupy mess down the ruins of his face. His skull was flattened. He must have been screaming as it happened because his jaw was torn apart, the upper half covering most of the top half of his face. Many of his bones tore through his skin, giving the impression that his skeleton was trying to escape from his flesh as the machine chewed him alive. I don't know how much of that is true, how much of it is just rumor. It doesn't really matter to me. What really matters is the question that's on everybody's mind. How long would it take for someone to die being crushed like that? I'd like to say Spencer died instantly. The police assured me that he did, although I wouldn't put it past them to lie to me for the sake of my sanity. Perhaps they're right. Perhaps it snapped his spine early on and he didn't suffer. But in my worst nightmares, I see a different picture. I stand outside the machine, only this time I can hear every twisted scream, every second of the agony that he endured. I can hear it even as the blood fills his throat and chokes him, flooding his lungs. The machine stops, but the screaming goes on for what feels like hours. And then the door opens, and I see his body, mangled beyond repair, a messy pulp of blood and shattered bones and scattered teeth. I see him dragging his body out of the machine, reaching for me as his raw nerves scream in pain, reaching to tear the life out of me in return for tearing the life out of him, gurgling in his throat a litany that I can just make out, even though he lacks a mouth capable of speech. Your fault.